Goddamn, old lady, chill. needs to chant all three of the dragons.
outside hand. えても無駄だよ。ぐずぐずしなさんな。
Is that like when asked why he's doing this, because people kept saying like, "Why are you doing this?" and he just kept saying, "Tariff is the best word in the English language." Like what? Tariffs, my favorite word, best word in the English language. No better word than tariffs. Trump is freezing the tariffs. Breaking news. Let's get into
Announced
it.
he will pause the 25% tariffs
Be back in a
on
second.
Mexican imports. We have reporters in Mexico City and in the North Lawn of the White House.
I'm glad, I'm glad that he's at least putting a pause on it, and it was just him being, he was doing like, what is it, the madman theory or whatever. He was behaving Nixonian like. So he's putting a pause on the tariffs. Oh, I'm pausing them. It didn't make any sense. Oh.
Let's go straight to CNN's Valeria Leon in Mexico City for the latest. Valeria, midnight was the deadline here where tariffs were supposed to be implemented. They're not now. Why?
So in a surprising shift, tariffs on Mexican goods are now on pause after President Sheinbaum and President Trump reached an agreement. So rather than presenting today Mexico's response to the Trump administration tariffs, President Sheinbaum confirmed that she had a conversation with President Trump this morning, what she described as a long call of 45 minutes to talk about immigration issues and the interest that both countries have in reducing fentanyl consumption. Both governments reached an agreement to secure the border. Mexico has agreed on deploying National Guards to the Mexico-U.S. border, and the Mexican president said that she asked Trump to cancel tariffs on Mexican products, which Sheinbaum said that Trump agreed to. Mexico's economy minister, Marcelo Ebrard, will be in charge of this negotiation with U.S. government officials. Let's put the tariffs on pause forever. That's what Mexico's president suggested to Trump this morning, but they agreed to pause tariffs for 1 month. Part of the agreement, she explained, has to do with the U.S. government committing to reducing the traffic arms into Mexico.
Valeria Leon, thanks so much. I want to turn to CNN's Kevin Liptak, who joins me now from the North Lawn at the White House. Kevin, there was also a call with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this morning. We haven't heard of any pause there, but there is supposed to be another one this afternoon. Is this just a bilateral Mexico-U.S. thing, or do we expect another pause also applying to the Canadians?
Yeah, at this point, this only applies to Mexico, and I'll tell you, after that phone call with Justin Trudeau, officials I talked to on the Canadian side were not all that optimistic about a last-minute reprise from these tariffs. But of course, they have scheduled up this follow-up conversation at 3 p.m. Eastern time, and it remains to be seen whether Trump will extend the same 1-month pause on those 25% tariffs on Canada as he did on Mexico. One thing that we've heard from officials this morning is that the negotiations with the Mexicans that occurred throughout the weekend were going much better than the conversations were going with the Canadians. We heard that from Kevin Hassett, one of the top economists here at the White House earlier this morning. Now, I think the big question is whether or not this is a huge surprise. We did hear from Donald Trump just last night that he didn't expect anything dramatic to come out of these telephone calls. But on the other hand, look at those numbers on the screen. The stock market, at one point the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down almost 600 points this morning. Donald Trump is attuned to nothing more than the stock market, and I think there was a sense, at least among some of his outside allies, that he was looking for an off-ramp here. Now, one of the big questions in this tariff battle is what exactly Trump was looking for from Canada and Mexico. That had been a point of and Mexican officials. What quantifiable metric did he want to see them take in order to ease off these tariffs? You know, just on Friday, a delegation of Canadian officials was here at the White House meeting with Donald Trump's border czar. They were supposed to meet around 4 p.m. Donald Trump at 4 p.m. says he wasn't looking for any concessions. So there was an incredible amount of confusion. Today, this morning, I think we are getting a good idea of what he's looking for, which is troops on the border, 10,000 troops on the border that Mexico says it will send to try and cut down on those fentanyl flows. So
we'll see what Canada offers in their negotiations. Obviously, 10% tariffs also on China. No indication right now of any calls there. Kevin Liptak, literally own, thanks so much. It is important to note that tariffs, as I noted, on China and Canada have not been paused, at least at this moment. That might explain some of the market reaction. We've seen a pop, but not an entirety of a turnaround. Senior business correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich joins me now. Do we expect a complete rebound here?
I think investors are being cautiously optimistic. This news, obviously, of this pause on tariffs with Mexico has encouraged investors, and you've seen markets recover just a little bit. They were down almost 2%, all of them, earlier this morning, but we've seen a pop. We've seen a recovery. But if you look at specific stocks, specific industries that were expected to be targeted with these tariffs, you see a mix. You see General Motors down over 2%. You see 3M, which is manufacturing, down about 1%, and Constellation Brands. This is a company, an alcohol company, that imports and exports from around the world. You see them still down over 2%. So investors still feeling a little bit shaky about whether or not tariffs will also be paused with Canada and Mexico, two of our key trading partners. As it stands right now, tariffs are set to go into effect with Canada, 25%, and about 10% with China. And the goods that are going to be impacted for everyday Americans, you see it right there: grain, livestock, sugar, fertilizer, lumber, oil and gas, only going to be targeted at about a 10% tariff coming in from Canada. And then from China, electronics, home appliances, toys, and footwear. Americans, we buy about 50% of our footwear from China, so that's a significant amount. So we are waiting to see what happens, and of course, Phil, retaliatory tariffs happen. We've already heard from Canada that they're expecting to retaliate with 25% tariffs against.
He was just memeing, dude. He was just memeing. Y'all don't understand. It was just meme style. He's just a little guy. He just wanted to look. Nazi Germany, post-World War I, feeling slighted by the rest of the Western world, right? The economy's in the pooper. Very different set of circumstances where they can set up an agenda that they've been wronged by everyone else, and that they're a powerful and mighty nation. The United States of America, albeit suffering a little bit due to its own selfish nature, is in a very different circumstance as the hegemonic superpower. So when you make the argument that like all of the other international countries are screwing us over, we are the ones that are constantly being screwed over by everybody else, and that's why we must take action against this sort of thing, you're in an entirely different predicament, because the entirety of the global trade is designed in a way that benefits you, okay? The entirety of global trade benefits the United States of America. It's like complaining about NATO, which Donald Trump does all the time as well. It makes no sense. Why would you complain about NATO when NATO is there for you? It's stupid. That's my point. Here's the Canada call that just came in as well. Just had a good call of President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list all cartels of terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I've also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we'll be backing it with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together. The most giga chat thing is Claudia made Trump admit the cartels are only armed because of the American weapons trade. Latinas stay winning. Yeah, Claudia is great. That's not famously when you import something, you're being ripped off. So when you import Indian-made iPhones, the U.S. is being ripped off. I think it's also very funny that they're forcing Canada's hand into like spending money on the most nonsensical bullshit. Like, what is it? It was like 43 kilograms of fentanyl total that was apprehended. And before people say, "Oh, dude, that's a lot of like lethal doses or whatever," no, it's not. Okay, it's nothing in comparison to the metric ton drugs that are being trafficked over the border in general. Okay, let alone border apprehensions are not, you know, they're probably not a long-term solution. I just don't understand. Oh, it's 43 pounds, not even 43 kilograms. That's so crazy. That's crazy. To be fair, fentanyl is measured in micrograms, so 43 kilograms is a lot. No, it's 19 kilograms. Is this an L or a W for Trump? It's a secret third thing. It's not an L, and it's not a W. It's just like a secret third thing, okay? That's what it is for Donald Trump. It's not a W because he didn't do shit. He did the classic, like, create a problem and then simultaneously fix the problem. No problem existed in the beginning. He phrased troops on the border differently than Mexico and are and will be working on protecting the border. Also, with the 1.3 billion on border measures was already decided before. Yeah.
So it's that are coming out of the U.S. and into Canada. We'll see. There's another call, as you mentioned, scheduled with Trudeau later this afternoon. Will there be a turnaround like there was with Mexico, Phil? We'll have to wait and see.
All right, Vanessa Yukevich, thanks so much. Joining me now for more on this, former Michigan Congressman and Governor James Blanchard, also served as the U.S. Ambassador to Canada. Sir, the biggest question right now is this the start of a complete turnaround, or is Donald Trump planning to split this on some level, and Canada is still going to have to face the tariffs? Do you have any insight right now?
I think there are people hoping there'll be some sort of deal soon and work things out. It's harder with Canada because the basis for attacking them is it's ridiculous. Trump is accusing them of being a national security threat. That's absurd. We share all intelligence. We've been allies with Canada since World War I. There's minuscule amounts of fentanyl coming in from Canada, and there are more migrants going north to Canada than south from Canada to the U.S. So the basis of all this is absurd. Hopefully it'll get worked out. But if we don't, the prices in Michigan and elsewhere, cost of living on food, cars, automobiles, will go up. It's inflationary. And look, everybody who knows anything about Canada and trade knows what I'm saying is true. Beyond that, though, if we get a deal, or a reprieve or something, the long-term damage to our relations with Canada has really, really been severe. This is not the feelings of Canadians, our best friend, our best partner, our best allies, have been really devastated. They're not only hurt, they're at this point angry. It's going to take a lot of time, many months, maybe years, to prepare.
Good question from a German chatter, me. How serious is fentanyl in the U.S. is actually a scourge on the people? And, or is the means proposed to solve it inadequate? The answer is both. Yes. The answer to both is yes. Yes. It is a massive, massive problem. Okay? Opioid overdoses are huge in our country. It is a genuinely devastating force upon the population. And maybe unsurprisingly, the second part of the question, the answer is still yes. Our solutions are inadequate. In the past couple of decades, since fentanyl became like an issue of ginormous importance, the only time fentanyl overdoses opiate overdoses have actually lowered year over year was under the Biden administration, which is ironic because they did it with harm reduction measures. The Republicans constantly complained about it, and also the Biden administration never actually hailed that as a heroic effort. You might have known about the Biden administration harm reduction efforts and their success because you watch me. I've talked about it. The media rarely covered it. The Biden administration did not even choose to do any sort of promotion of of these programs, or rather, they did do promotions of these programs, but they never really promoted how successful that was, and it is truly, truly shocking. The people that are most responsible for this, they have names, they have addresses. We know who they are. That's the other side of the story as well. It's the Sacklers, right? Purdue Pharmaceutical is owned by an incredibly wealthy family, and a family of incredibly wealthy people who personally were invested in the trafficking of opiates and the marketing of opiates. They set up think tanks, harm reduction facilities, pain management facilities, and greatly overprescribed OxyContin, told doctors to do so. This is the reason why Americans got addicted to heroin. Were they punished? No. A Jewish family. I love this notion that it's like, it's the Sacklers. Sacklers are a Jewish family. That's what's most important here. You know, their religious background. Yeah. When Christian billionaires come over, that's fine because they're Christian. That's what I care about. Good stuff. Nan Golden got the Sackler name taken off several museums through protests over their oxy dealings. Okay, but they should be in prison. All right, let's continue.
Damage to our partnership with our trusted ally Canada, and everyone in Canada watching this knows what I say is true. This is tragic for no reason, no excuse here for us to do this to Canada. And with Mexico, again, you don't want to treat your partners, your neighbors this way. And by the way, it's disgusting to watch Trump constantly threaten Canada and Mexico.
Damn, Scott loves Canada, bro. Why don't you marry it? Okay, calm down. It's disgusting what we've done to our best friend Canada. It is a ridiculous thing that Donald Trump has done. Make no mistake. To put it in a way foreign shadows can understand, my brother used to go to the walk-in clinic and pretend that he had a sore throat, then walk out with a liquid codeine prescription. It was scary. It was scary, easy to get your hands on it. Yeah. I mean, he did it again, man. The mad lad did it. The more I think about it, the funnier it gets. But like, Donald Trump used to do this all the time. I guess we forgot. Where he would just be like, I'm gonna shake things up a little bit. And then he would, break something for no reason, and then quote unquote seemingly fix it by just reversing the previous decision to break something that didn't have to be that makes no sense to break. You know what I mean? And the tariff thing just simply did not make sense. Like when I say no reason, seriously, yes, no reason. Like, dude, come on, dude. You think there was a logical reason? Oh god, it's so freaking annoying. The lighting changes are pissing me off. You think there was a valid reason to apply tariffs to 55% of our trade partners? Like, our partners that comprise 55% of all trade? Like, what's the severe problem? Tariffs have to be hyper-specific. They have to be hyper-targeted. They have to be done. They have to be applied in a way that benefits domestic manufacturing in a key sector. Okay? You can't just be like, oh, I'm doing complete trade tariffs, like all tariffs. It doesn't make sense. If you do that for anything but an economic reason, it has to be ginormous. You mean like Canada did? Yeah, no, that's a great example. Canada's counter tariffs are perfectly reasonable because it was a counter tariff. It is a retaliatory tariff. Yes, that is an appropriate way to do tariffs because you're hitting the nuclear option because your psychotic neighbor decided to go after you for no reason whatsoever. So yeah, that is logical because notice how that's a defensive posture there. It's basically to say, hey, we'll make your economy scream as well. We'll make sure that your key businesses are undermined. We'll lower trade from you, and we'll go trade with Canada instead. That's it. That makes a lot more sense than being the United States of America who kickstarts the tariffs to begin with. Also, it seemingly worked, considering that Donald Trump backed down and put a pause on the tariffs anyway. So what are you talking about?
Canada's case constantly threatened Canada and belittle them as he's moving out.
Like I love that the impact of the retaliatory tariffs was successful. So successful that it caused Trump to back down. And there are still chatters in here being like, Nixonian madman theory might be right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. He's basically saying, like, I'm insane, okay? Don't mess with me, I guess.
Question that you could agree to change your mind on the
Well,
tariff?
we can always, look, what I'd like to
It seems like this must be a negotiation tactic since this sounds so insane, but friends in the Canadian government have told me that he hasn't privately conveyed any other actual demands. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. There is no real reason for it, okay? Like, there's no real it just doesn't make sense. It literally does not make sense. Has he absolutely lost his mind? I don't know. He's just trying some shit out. Seeing what sticks, I guess. I don't know. Because this is the other side of the story, is that, like, when asked why he's doing this, because people kept saying, like, why are you doing this? And he just kept saying tariff is the best word in the English language. Like, what? Tariffs, my favorite word. Best word in the English language. No better word than tariffs. And then they'd be like, why are you doing this to Canada? And you'd be like, well, drugs. Canada's letting fentanyl come over the border. Snow Mexico! We have Mexico on the southern border, snow Mexicans on the north. We must stop them. Like, he just needed something to run on as an answer to his base. They could easily implement a rollback with no one else's input.
We've seen Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina.
Another part of this story that I'm a little bit alarmed by is the Republican reaction to it. The Republicans have been just, like, begging to invade Canada, you know, in this process. Like, we all went from, like, haha, that's not gonna happen, to, like, Republicans being like, no, we actually want to kill Canadians. Like, can we please annex Canada? And it happened relatively quickly. It happened overnight. And it is a bit alarming. It is a bit alarming. Despite its proximity, Canada has still been able to maintain some semblance of social safety nets. They have a litany of their own personal issues, but I will admit that I think they're better off without us, and that they should not be destroyed by our sweet, sweet freedom of private enterprise. I really, really, really think that it would be devastating, and it would be cruel and unusual for Canada to become a part of America, no matter how much dumbass Albertans wish that upon their own people. Okay? Canada, get behind me. I'll protect you. Okay? Canadians, get behind me. Stand back, stand by. I will do everything in my power to ensure that you are not destroyed by the United States of America. Okay? Look at this dipshit. After we destroy the Canadian economy, their will to resist will erode. We will then march in unopposed and deliver Canada to its rightful place as a territory of the U.S. with no political representation. Honestly, you seem disinterested about annexing Canada? Yes. American Anschluss. That's funny. Yeah, shit's popping off with U.S. aid. The best part of the concessions that both Mexico and Canada gave today are that both of them are pre-promised stuff they already talked about last year and sold them to Trump as a win for him. Lamau, they gave him basically nothing and it's funny as shit. Yeah, but it also still doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense as to why it happened to begin with. It did not need to happen. Also, Central Committee, thank you for the raid. Hope you had a good stream, brother. Thanks for defending us, but does that mean that you specifically will stop your cruel Canadian slander? No, I will never stop my cruel Canadian slander. This is like when I talk shit about every state and the people in it, and then when push comes to shove, and I obviously will always defend every single person in every single state, no matter what, you know? I'm not gonna stop making fun of Canada. I don't know what's going on with the ending of U.S. aid. Like, I genuinely don't understand it. Is MAGA communism real? Is it actually J.D. Pondon? These are questions that I have in my mind, and I don't know. That is like one aspect of the story that is hard to also decipher. I guess most aspects of the story are hard to decipher, but this is yet another aspect of the story that's hard to decipher. Not dissimilar to the Luca trade. Okay?
Or any one of our
Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars, they can do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. So I say, why are we doing this? Why are we willing to lose between $100 billion and $200 billion a year? We don't need that. As a state, it's different. As a state, it's much different. And there are no tariffs. So I'd love to see that, but some people say that would be a long shot. If people wanted to play the game right, it would be 100% certain that they'd become a state. But a lot of people don't like to play the game because they don't have a threshold of pain. And there would be some pain, but not a lot. The pain would be really there. So we're going to meet again.
Don't jump. Some dudes are typing and own a pixel chat that you want to debate with him. Lamau, who's own a pixel? Trump announced he's cutting off aid to UNRWA. Least surprising turn of events. Also, the Biden admin, still following the Biden admin attitude here. What is this? When most people hear tariff, they think about how it sounds like sheriff and taffy combined. Delicious, yet deadly. You're right. That is an interesting take that I hadn't thought of. He's the best German of all time? Hell yeah. What are we going to debate on? CS Gamba addict? I think if America forcibly annexed Canada and tried to turn it into a state, you'd see some... the Quebecois would teach you the meaning of real terrorism, okay? Like, the Quebecers already are angry at being a part of Canada in general. I can't think of anything worse, right? Dude, imagine you're a Quebecer and now you have to be a part of America. Oh my lord. They would make the IRA look like a tickle party, I think. And of course, as is the case with most emancipatory movements, I probably would find myself aligning with them in spite of my disagreements on many of their internal affairs, and then maybe people would write articles about how much of a radical terrorism lover I am, because I'm not simply on board with forcibly annexing Quebec. You won't get tariffs as we don't produce shit. Most goated U.S. vassal state, now what, Israel? Trump says ceasefire might not hold. Update on Trump's meeting with Netanyahu. I mean, what holds nowadays anyway? Jesus Christ. Netanyahu is visiting Washington to convince Trump to carve an exception for Israel out of his wider America First agenda. U.S. foreign aid will revolve around facilitating Israel's ethnic cleansing and regional domination goals and maintaining alliances that serve Israeli interests. Israeli outlet Ynet reports that during Netanyahu's visit this week, the Israelis plan to show Trump's shortened version of the film they made of the October 7 attacks. Recall that Joe Biden repeatedly made false claims about seeing videos and images of beheadings of children and other specific atrocities that did not happen or being shown footage by Israel. Okay, interesting opportunity here. This backfires. Trump gets really mad that they showed him, all of this gory footage. He doesn't care. You think he cares? He sat in front of the Israeli hostage families and described the gruesome ways in which some of their family members were murdered, okay? This man does not care about anything, okay? If you show him even a shortened version, an abbreviated version of the atrocities that took place on October 7th, he's going to sit there and he's going to get pissed off, not about the atrocities themselves, but at the people forcing him to watch this, okay? Yeah, he's going to be like, they made me watch this video. I hated it. I hated every moment of it. Such terrible events. That's right. We are now officially ending the state of Israel for the crime of making me watch this video. Nasty video. Also, this is crazy. I feel like he's such a monster. He wouldn't be bothered by it. No, he'd be annoyed. That's what I'm saying. Joe Biden will watch it and go, Joe Biden will watch it and obviously do an entire unlimited genocide. Donald Trump already is down to do an unlimited genocide anyway. I don't know why you're making him watch this. Pretty sure Netanyahu's convinced him to go over South Africa. Oh yeah, for sure. That's a certainty. Netanyahu is the reason why he also issued sanctions on Bensouda, the last prosecutor at the ICC. The last prosecutor at the ICC that he applied sanctions.
That you're going to cut aid from South Africa. Will you plan to cut aid across other African nations, and why South
No, it's
Africa?
only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa.
Right.
The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating.
Trump refuses to watch a video like you refuse to watch Ethan's Lamont. Yeah, the difference is Donald Trump didn't do October 7, whereas Ethan's video is about me. I don't have to watch a video that I'm in prominently. The video is about me, calling me a terrorist for shit that I have said that is clipped out of context. Like, you know what? Let me explain something to you guys. I wanted to mention this. Look at this. Okay? On my YouTube, there's a video called Hassan versus Ethan Explained. Okay? It's sitting at 500,000 views. It's from October 25th, 2024. I want you to watch that video and see how many of the claims that are in Ethan's new context nuke that are directly in this video and have been addressed. Now this video has been out for 3 months. It's been out for 3 months, 3 whole months. Maybe Ethan's content nuke was already addressed before it ever came out. Could have saved himself that trouble of sitting in the editing room for months and months. But that's not the point. The point is he wants to turn it into content. It's gross. Like he wants to turn my reaction into content. And I suspect that he will continue doing that and constantly present it as like how much he has owned me and how frazzled I am over and over again. And, you know, that's it. Yeah, he wants a feedback loop with follow response. Exactly. He can't actually have, he can't actually talk to me in person about any number of different issues because he knows that he is ill-equipped. So he will consistently hide behind Instagram stories and his YouTube live feed that he heavily monitors the chat in, that he's basically culled any sort of dissent in his own community in, and carefully crafted an audience that is receptive to this sort of thing, mostly because of Epstein's fanboys that are brigading that he wants in his community, slowly but surely reshaping his community into a very toxic one, you know? Yeah, wait, now you're claiming to be the world's foremost expert on Hassan Piker. Anything you need to study up, pal? Yeah. The comments on the live show were hard. The comments on the live show were coming for him hard. Members weren't happy. I know, but it doesn't matter. He just keeps banning those comments. He just keeps banning his own members and just moving on and thinking like, no, I'm on a righteous quest. The difference is I'm not, what do you call it, Ryan Kavanaugh or whatever his name is. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not some random social media billionaire who's done a bunch of shit. This isn't over, like, me genuinely wronging someone. This is entirely personal. You feel slighted. Careful, you are showing your power level. I know. You feel slighted. You feel upset that your own fan base obviously got mad at you for your lackluster defense of Palestine. And instead of addressing it and going back to the drawing board, trying to understand why people were getting mad at you this way because of your output, because of the words you were using, you decided to consistently level up and just cry more and more. And literally, the entire point revolves around like, no, you guys don't understand. I'm the true defender of Palestine, guys. Me, I'm the true defender, not Hassan. He's actually a terrorist. And then a bunch of other disinterested people who, after 16 months, are still running around being like, no, he's not a good defender of the Palestinian plight. I am. It's additionally wild because he's, you know, would you say that that the Ethan Klein versus Son Piker videos meet the grams. I don't know. I don't care about making a comparison here between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. To be honest, it's silly. Yeah. And if KRZ even defended you saying that he's just using typical Israeli talking points to call people who are against Israel, dude, yes, it's planes falling out of the sky, Donald Trump ushering in the Fourth Reich, burger style, okay? Israel has all but completed its genocide in North Gaza, or at least tried to complete it. Ceasefires on shaky grounds, virtually every building in Gaza destroyed, and one of the most outspoken, most attacked defenders of Palestinians being called a terrorist over and over again. I feel like if you consider yourself to be a progressive person, your priorities are entirely out of whack. You can try to say, no, I just simply want like a better liberal advocacy for Palestinians all day, every day, but most people understand what's going on. That's it. This is precisely the reason why it's like, that's literally not true. The video showed receipts and is obviously wants to defend his name since your fan base drags him. His whole point is he defends Gaza, but he thinks Jewish people don't deserve to die. Maybe watch the whole video instead of clips. Maybe Ethan should actually, remember the conversations that we had in person for 2 hours instead of literally clip chipping those very same conversations a year after the fact to put it in his video where he calls me a terrorist over and over again, terrorist sympathizer over and over again, like he's goddamn Steven Crowder. But because it's about Israel, people don't have the comprehension skills to understand what he's doing. Just debate then because this is sad. Shut the up. I already said I wanted to. He's the one who's like, you have to watch my video first, which is ridiculous. I'm the subject matter of the video. If he wants to have a conversation with me, we had a podcast, Yeah, you don't understand. He just doesn't want Jewish people to die. Yeah, I don't either, dumbass. The fuck are you talking about? Like, what is this argument? Yeah, you think I want Jewish people to die? What are you, stupid? Are you insane? Oh, I didn't realize he had such a reasonable position. His receipts are 17-second clips over and over again. Alright, anyway. Are you gonna let today be derailed by Drama Slop? Because you say I never talk about drama and shout down anyone who asks you to move on, then talk about it for another 2 hours. The 90% of us is white noise. This is true. You are correct. Yeah. Yeah, the guy who in the month of October when talking, or in the month of November when talking to me, called Jewish Voice for Peace, Capos, is the true pro-Palestinian voice, and he's just simply trying to make sure that everyone is pro-Palestine the right way. Come on, guys, he gave my fundraiser money. He can't be that bad. He gave my fundraiser that this community did, where we raised millions of dollars, okay? He gave that fundraiser money. He can't. He's come on. Yeah. He paid the fee. He paid the fee so that he could spend the next year shitting on virtually everyone that was involved with that fundraiser by calling them terrorists, and also even successfully getting them banned by demanding they get banned over hummus, dude. Like, I was so charitable for an entire year, but there's a point where it's like, come on, let's get real. You're giving him and his goons exactly what they want right now. I know. Yeah, I know. Alright, let's get back to the tariffs. Everybody understands what's what here.
With his policies, it is really insulting, and it is a terrible representative of the leader of the United States of America. No American president has ever acted like this toward Canada or frankly almost anybody else.
To the point.
You broke up.
To the point you're making right now, when you talk to your diplomatic contacts in Canada, what is their view? I understand the anger. I understand the frustration. What are they telling you about what the end game is, kind of the bilateral relationship, what it means going forward?
I mean, look, they need to work something out. Every trade deal, every trade agreement has off-ramps. And the U.S., Canada, Mexico trade agreement was scheduled to be reviewed next year. So there's probably a fig leaf that Canada can give Trump if they want to, that Trump will accept and proclaim victory like invading Normandy or something. Look, we're dealing with an abnormal guy in the White House. We all know that. The problem the Canadians have is they don't understand why the United States Senate is standing up to him. They really wonder about that. Sure, there could be a short-term solution a few more border guards, something like that, which Canada can easily do and would do. I mean, look, we share the patrol of the Great Lakes. We have Americans, Coast Guard, and Canadian in the same boats. All right, and I'm sensitive to that being the mission. So cooperation has been the hallmark, not conflict. They can work something out, but I'm telling you, this has gone too far. And I think most people, as I said, who are friends of Canada and the United States agree with me. Canada does not deserve this. They deserve their respect and friendship, and we're going to repair the damage.
I think that we have.
Okay. Falling on the Trump tariffs. Paraphrasing Howard Stern's mother, something horrible has happened. That's how most Americans feel about Trump tariffs. They don't like them. Wait, what? Why? Dude, why are...
Look at this.
Dude, every time I see Harry Enton on television, doing focus testing or showcasing polls, and virtually everyone says like, oh, dude, what the f are tariffs? Everybody started Googling tariffs. I am reminded of the thing that I tell you all the time, okay? Americans are very stupid. Americans are very stupid. Americans don't understand the impact of government action until that government action is staring down, that government action is about to impact their lives, or that government action has impacted their lives, okay? This is precisely the reason why I laugh whenever people go, well, you don't understand, like 56% of Americans want to kill every Mexican. It's like, yeah, okay, dude, sure, all right? Wait till it starts happening, and then you'll go, oh, everyone is Googling why the American government is killing Mexicans. It's the same shit. And this is not just America. It happened with Brexit. This is just the global population, okay? Specifically, or especially in the Western world. But this is just how it is. How many times does that have to happen for you guys to go, okay, maybe polling on issues like this are not necessarily the most, not necessarily the most comprehensive way of approaching the subject matter. Not necessarily the best way of seeing how the people are going to react to something once it happens. Look at the TikTok ban, okay? Look at the fucking TikTok ban. Americans wanted the TikTok ban at the time when the legislation was happening. It's like, no, they didn't, okay? They did not. They did not. Look at the numbers. You got 170 million people using this goddamn application. What? Why would they want their treats taken away? Until something happens, most Americans are not going to reckon with the reality of it, okay? That's it. That's it. Also, it doesn't really matter because the American government does not actually operate on the basis of popular democracy anyway. It's not like the American government goes, oh wow, this particular thing is very popular, let's do it. They do the exact opposite more consistently. You would have an easier time understanding what the American government is going to do if you were to look at something with like broad popularity and then expect the government to do the exact opposite of that thing that is broadly popular. And that's how it works. Oh my God. Always and forever and consistently. It sucks. But here it is. Most Americans are now Googling what tariffs are. Okay? Most Americans are now Googling what tariffs are. They are terrified of Trump's tariffs. It's like, yeah, no shit. How many on the street interviews do we see of people just being like, nah, you don't understand, brother. Tariffs are gonna be great. Egg prices are gonna go down with the tariffs. It's like, what? How? Your expectation is the opposite of what is supposed to happen. If broad tariffs are implemented on 55%, 60% of our trade partners, all trade, it's the exact opposite. Is there a particular reason? Do you want to move all trade to India? Is that what it is? Or Vietnam or something? Like, have you set this up already ahead of time? Do you have a competent, competitive domestic industry that will keep up with the additional demand? Do you have a way of ensuring price stability so that the competent domestic manufacturing increases production in a way to keep up with the demand without increasing the prices on the consumer side? No. If the answer is no to all of these things, then what the f are you doing? Like, oh, well, Trump said it's gonna be good, so I think it's gonna be good. Oh no, what has happened? Where my egg gone? Why is everything so expensive? Why is everything getting more and more expensive? I don't understand it. And then in the process, some people are going to turn around and say, it's actually patriotic to pay more for the price of eggs, brother, you piece of shit, you goddamn libtard, you don't understand. America #1, okay? And then the other people are going to look at the situation and go, it's because of black people working in the factories. That's why. DEI in my poultry facility is what caused the bird flu, avian flu they're calling it, which is also simultaneously woke and gay and made up, but also a devastating virus caused by the Chinese. None of it makes sense. All of it is politics of resentment and spite. None of it makes sense. There is no logic behind it. There's no critical thinking. Barely any literacy in this goddamn country. I don't know what the fuck to say.
I feel like Howard Stern's mother, something horrible has happened here. That's what's going on. You're getting on my biggest New York Jewish accent I could. Trump's tariffs on Canada, China, Mexico. Look at this. Just 38% support. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to figure out that 51% oppose is larger than the 38% support. Look, Trump has done some fairly popular things in his first few weeks in office. This is not one of them. No, no, no. Horrible, 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 to quote Charles Barkley. The American folks are opposed to these tariffs. When you ask it specifically like this about the three countries, or if you ask it more vaguely about tariffs overall, they simply put, do not like it, Mr.
It's interesting, even with China in the question, people say that they are opposed to tariffs. The majority here, there's not a majority on a lot of things these days. How about how Americans say they want to see Donald Trump focused in this first 100 days and whether tariffs should be a focus?
You know, the two big focuses for Trump in the polling are immigration and the economy. Tariffs ain't it, my dear friend. Tariffs ain't it. Trump should focus on tariffs. In November of 2024, when Ipsos asked it was 1%. Look at what happened in December of 2024. It doubled. It doubled, but to only 2%. When you double to only 2%, you know that the American people don't want Trump's focus to be here. They don't like it. They don't want his focus to be there. They want it to be on other issues.
Are they paying attention? Do they notice that this is happening?
Yeah, so the big question is, you know, Trump has done a lot of things that are unpopular in the past, but the poll numbers haven't moved. That may be the case here, but I'm a little skeptical of that. Why?
Bro, I got family with accounting degrees that still believe what Trump says about tariffs. I don't understand. Is macro econ not like a part of the conversation? What is happening? Like, is there no, like, in order to become a CPA, you definitely have to have a basic understanding of this sort of stuff. Dude, why? What is, accounting is microeconomics? What are you talking about? You still need to take macro? What are you saying? Macroecon in college is fake and lib-coded? It's literally, I took principles of macroeconomics in college. Guys, what is insane about this process is I shouldn't be defending it, okay? They should be defending it, okay? They should be saying the words that are coming out of my mouth. If you're an accountant, you should be like, what the, this is so dumb. I took a basic macro course in college before I got my accounting license, okay? So I'm somewhat familiar with what is going on. That's what they should be, that's the conversation that should be taking place. Why am I defending it? It doesn't make sense. What is this? We got Egg Watch? Okay, you did a horrible job linking this, chatter. 22 Egg Watch currently, oh my god, 812. Are there even eggs in any of the grocery stores right now in America? Because I've been eating a shit ton of eggs out here, whether it be a tamago sando, or whether it be when I go to a sukiyaki place and I dip my wagyu in it, you know, I dip my wagyu in the broth, and then I pull it out of the broth, and then I dip it in the egg, and then I eat it. That's what I did last night, actually. It was incredible. And, you know, it's amazing. It's going to be really horrible when I come back to the United States and realize that eggs don't even exist on the shelves anymore because of the goddamn avian flu. And it's good that, you know, we've destroyed the FDA, the CDC, and the NIH. So that's cool. I guess when you kill the institutions that are supposed to inform the public about these sorts of things, then no one really knows what's going on, and they just simply don't have eggs on the shelves. And then people go, oh, these eggs must be flying off the shelves because it's so cheap, I think. And I can never seem to find some eggs. Because Donald Trump brought forth the most bountiful, with his incredible leadership, Donald Trump once again brought such bounties upon the American public. We have been visited by good fortune. The real golden age of eggs is upon us. Trump's great leap backwards. That's for half a dozen. You may notice a price increase on eggs at this time due to the recent avian influenza outbreak in the Midwest. That's crazy, but also, have you thought maybe it's actually liptides eggs? Oh, we lost an egg truck in East Los Angeles this morning. Yeah. Traffic alert. Egg truck crash causing major delays on 5 freeway through East Los Angeles. Good stuff. At least they're sharing the real reason. Imagine we'll be getting public health alerts on grocery shelves now. Oh yeah. For context, in Canada, I can get a carton of eggs for $4 CAD, $2.77 USD. Okay, dude, what do you want me to do about it? I'm over here talking about how we shouldn't annex Canada, and you're making it seem like we should. Okay? Stop giving the game away. You're about to get slapped with terror. Dude, the flex is crazy, by the way. The expensive eggs delivered to my home in the UK, $3.15 for a dozen. USA absolutely tanking. The new Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, state's top public diplomacy official, not only denies the Uyghur genocide, but appears to applaud it. Says the U.S. should sell out Taiwan and China for concessions to Antarctica. What? What? The Chinese aren't genocidal, they just object to Uyghur supremacy and Uyghurness. If Uyghurs simply reject Uyghur supremacy, they'll have no problem functioning in Chinese society. Okay. Wait, what? Is this a joke? No shot. There is no way. What? What? Uyghur supremacy? That's insane. No, it's gotta be a meme. I've never seen somebody with a globe emoji defend China to a degree where they are outflanking tankies, dude. Like, this guy is unironically outflanking China defenders, okay? What the... Even, like, the most hog-like defenders of Chinese actions in Xinjiang will at least say, like, oh, they're separatist terrorists that, like, the American CIA armed to disrupt Chinese affairs, right? And they had to be dealt with by a surveillance state or whatever, right? I've never heard somebody hit that, like, liberal tone of being like, this is like saying Hamas is actually advocating for, like, Islamic supremacy over Israel. That's why Israel has to destroy them. Taiwan will inevitably belong to China. It's only a matter of time. It's not worth expending any capital to prevent. A visionary statesman will recognize this and make a deal in exchange for acknowledgement of this basic reality. Get some serious concessions on Africa and Antarctica. Big deal to be made. If Uyghurs don't like anti-Uyghur racism, it must be because they are Uyghur nationalists who think all of China is for Uyghurs only. Bro, I have literally never heard that. What is he saying? I have never heard that from even, like, the most insane Salafist guy who's like a Uyghur separatist is not like all of China belongs to us. What the... I don't think there is a single guy. I don't think there is a single Uyghur dude who's like, no, you don't understand. The entirety of China is ours. Okay? That's like, I don't even think the hogs in China believe that that is what they're saying. This is awesome. This is a new type of guy. Chat, you don't understand. I've never seen a new type of guy like this before. This guy is awesome. Amazing. Amazing. The same guy that said this. Competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work. Unfortunately, our entire national ideology is predicated on coddling the feelings of women and minorities and demoralizing competent white men. This guy's insane. It's real that he was appointed. ADL, your fave, wrote an article about how he was a Nazi before. just now because they don't want to offend Trump. Now that Darren Beattie has been tapped to serve at the State Department, the ADL has dutifully removed the press release on their website where they call him a Nazi white supremacist. Dude, come on. Dude, come on, dude.
Elon Musk is wreaking havoc across the federal government right now, but most notably with USAID. We got huge updates on Trump's tariff war with Canada and Mexico, with the next 30 days being pivotal. What we've learned about the plane crash in Philadelphia and New York is now trying to protect doctors who are sending abortion pills out of state from criminal charges. We're talking about all that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it. But first, something fun and great before I go ahead and ruin your day for the next 20 minutes. As I'm releasing this video over at beautifulbastard.com, I just released 3 new tees, hoodies, and crews, all of which feel perfect for the times that we're living through. Starting with there's been too much stuff happening lately, to be honest, gear, accompanied by the clearly thriving goodness and the genuinely timeless, I'm just built different, poorly tee, hoodies, and crews. All available right now over at beautifulbastard.com in a few colorways, so grab what you want while you can, wear your feelings. But like I said, we have a lot of big news to talk about today, starting with this. We need to talk about the absolute havoc that Elon Musk is wreaking across the federal government right now, from the Treasury Department to the Office of Personnel Management to the United States Agency for International Development. Because Elon, as we know, is the head of the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency. So there, to be clear, DOGE isn't actually a government department, right? It's just a team within the administration. Congress is supposed to be the one with the power to establish or shut down federal departments and agencies, and with that, right, Musk, he hasn't been elected, he hasn't been confirmed, and he sure as hell isn't a career civil servant. And in fact, as the world's richest man, one who has consistently railed against what he sees as the injustice of federal regulation of his companies, he is possibly the most substantial conflicts of interest of anyone in this government. But despite all that, he is reportedly creating chaos, shattering precedent, and gaining almost unheard of access and influence across almost every actual department, agency, and office in the government. And so with that, let's start with the Department of Treasury, where the news starts with a standoff between DOGE and a man by the name of David Lieber. Right, notably, David is a guy who has dedicated his life to civil service. When his former colleagues say he could have been making millions on Wall Street. He started his career in the Treasury as an intern way back in 1989. He's been the Fiscal Assistant Treasury Secretary since 2014, which is the highest position a civil service employee can actually reach. And notably, everyone above him would be a political appointee. With David being described as the one who both runs the nation's checkbook and being widely credited with steering the nation's finances through the debt ceiling crises of the past 15 years. The key thing with all that is that Trump named Lieber acting Secretary of the Treasury Department upon taking office last month. But then, Musk and his allies pushing him for access to the department's payment system. And notably, according to reports that included Tom Krause, the chief executive of a tech company called Cloud Software Group, who's now working with DOGE. But what we saw is that Lieber resisted, with him then being placed on administrative leave, the Senate confirming Trump's pick as the new Treasury head, and on Friday, Lieber resigned. So then, very quickly, with Trump's new guy in charge, Musk's team was given access to the payment systems, which, is a very big deal, because these systems, they control the flow of more than $6 trillion every year, and tens, if not hundreds of millions of people across the country rely on them for the distribution of Social Security and Medicare benefits, salaries, payments to government contractors and grant recipients, and tax refunds, among tens of thousands of other functions. So with all this, you then have Musk claiming on X. The DOGE team discovered, among other things, that payment approval officers at Treasury were instructed always to approve payments, even to known fraudulent or terrorist groups, with the men claiming they literally never denied a payment in their entire career, not even once. But then with all that, you have people saying, one, this is the case with many of his claims, he provided no evidence there to back it up. And two, to be very clear, the Treasury does in fact have a do-not-pay system to prevent payments to terrorists, fraudsters, and other bad actors. But in any case, with that, Musk is now reportedly using his new power to shut down some payments to some federal contractors. So this including, for example, shutting down payments by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to Lutheran Family Services, which notably is a faith-based charity that has been providing social services to refugees. And that is a whole other can of worms, because as explained by Bloomberg, for example, Treasury officials have long maintained that its role is to serve as the federal government's checkbook, and noting that the decision about whether to approve or deny payments belongs to individual agencies based on funds appropriated by Congress. And so this is all wrapped up in this debate about whether or not the president can withhold funds Congress has already approved. Right? And with that, notably, according to a 1974 federal law known as the Impound and Control Act, he generally can't. But you have some Trump aides arguing that the law is unconstitutional, which of course paves the way for a court battle. But also, in the meantime, Democrats are of course coming down hard on everything that happened with the Treasury. Senator Ron Wyden, for example, the top Democrat Senate Finance Committee writing a letter to the new secretary saying, to put it bluntly, these payment systems simply cannot fail, and any politically motivated meddling in them risks severe damage to our country and the economy. Continuing, I can think of no good reason why political operators who have demonstrated a blatant disregard for the law would need access to these sensitive mission-critical systems. And then you also had Peter Welch, another Democratic member of the Senate Finance Committee, saying in a statement, it's a gross abuse of power by an unelected bureaucrat, and it shows money can buy power in the Trump White House. And then, of course, with all that, the usual cliche applies. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because reportedly, similar Doge teams have begun demanding access to data and systems at other federal agencies as well. On Friday, for example, Musk's team reportedly locked career civil servants at the OPM out of computer systems that contain the personal data of millions of federal employees. This data reportedly including dates of birth, social security numbers, appraisals, home addresses, pay grades, and length of service of government workers. With one official even telling Reuters, we have no visibility into what they are doing with the computer and data system, saying this is creating great concern. There is no oversight. It creates real cybersecurity and hacking implications. But then, with all that, right, the agency getting the biggest shakeup, at least for now, it's probably USAID. The shakeup might not be the word, because Musk is now saying that Trump agrees that the whole thing must go. With that, USAID getting hit is something that we've talked about ever since Trump issued a sweeping executive order suspending foreign aid for 90 days. With that, then leading to mass confusion, layoffs, and program shutdowns. I mean, for example, more than 1,000 USAID employees and contractors have already been fired or furloughed. And then, on top of that, around 60 senior USAID staff were put on leave last week after being accused of attempting to circumvent the foreign aid freeze. And then, another senior official being put on leave for trying to reverse that move after finding no evidence of wrongdoing. But now, what we're seeing is that Musk's involvement is taking the chaos to a whole new level. We're starting with this weekend when Doge personnel reportedly tried to access classified USAID security systems and personnel files at the agency's headquarters in D.C. However, they, or at least some of them, reportedly lacked high enough security clearance to access that information, so the two USAID security officials believe themselves legally obligated to deny access. The Doge personnel, however, they reportedly demanded to be let in and threatened to call U.S. Marshals to be allowed access. And eventually, according to reports, they got in, again, accessing classified information, which reportedly included intelligence reports. Also on Saturday, USAID's website went dark and a new page for the agency appeared on the State Department website. Also, USAID's X account went offline, and then finally, those two officials who kept Doge out, they were put on administrative leave. With then Musk saying in response that, quote, USAID is a criminal organization, time for it to die. And this is you then had Katie Miller and another Doge official claiming no classified material was accessed without proper security clearances. However, with that, one thing to keep in mind is that in addition to canceling 50 security clearances in what's been described as an unprecedented partisan move, Trump also granted temporary security clearances to officials who had not been fully vetted, which is something critics say makes the U.S. vulnerable. And so with that, we saw Democratic members of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee writing a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying, potential access of sensitive, even classified files raises deep concerns about the protection and safeguarding of matters related to U.S. national security. Also saw people like AOC writing on X, having an unelected billionaire with his own foreign debts and motives raiding U.S. classified information is a grave threat to national security. This should not be a partisan issue. But there, you then had some hitting back, predicting that Doge will uncover waste, fraud, and corruption, with then AOC responding. If you want to start with waste, start with Elon's defense contracts at the Pentagon. In fact, we should start with transparency around defense contracts in general, which takes up an enormous sum of public funds. But they won't do that, will they? Also, with everything here, I will say when it comes to USAID, this is about way more than just accessing data. You also have Musk describing the agency as evil and a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America, with then Trump piling on yesterday as well, telling reporters it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics and we're getting them out and then we'll make a decision. But that decision, it's reportedly already been made, with Musk saying that Trump is on board, that USAID should be shut down. There's reportedly being a claim made by Musk in a conversation on X Spaces early this morning with Republican Senators Joni Ernst, Mike Lee, and former Doge co-lead Vivek Ramaswamy.
It's also incredibly politically partisan and has been supporting radical left causes throughout the world, including things that are anti-American, which is insane.
And Musk is right. That is insane, and it clearly shows we need to have a conversation about what USAID actually does, because it's not that. So the agency was established in 1961 under JFK, and it is the world's single largest donor, providing 42% of all humanitarian aid tracked by the United Nations in 2024. But then also, with that, foreign aid overall, of which USAID is only one part of, accounts for less than 1% of the federal budget. But that's still billions of dollars that, among other things, goes to projects aimed at alleviating poverty, treating diseases, and responding to famines and natural disasters, as well as promoting independent media, social initiatives, and anti-corruption work. I mean, for example, we have talked about the agency's work combating HIV and AIDS, but also the New York Times, for example, reporting on the other effective programs like funds working against forced labor and trafficking of Chinese workers. You know, with all this, I constantly hit on this, the world is not black and white. All of that is not to say that the agency is beyond criticism, or that there is not money going to places and people with various political leanings you might take issue with. But that is a conversation to be had, but it's not the one that we're having. We're basically entire world, and people are going to die. Now with that, I will say some of the USAID functions are meant to survive. Right? You have Trump administration officials reportedly discussing placing the agency under the authority of or merging it with the State Department. But notably, that's a move that Democratic lawmakers and legal experts have argued would break a law adopted by Congress establishing the agency. But critics also saying it's a threat to national security, arguing U.S. aid has been essential to building goodwill and developing alliances to counter the country's adversaries. But despite all that, moves are still being made today. Right? More than 600 employees reported getting locked out of USAID's computer systems overnight. And then today, you had agency staff is reportedly being physically blocked from the agency's D.C. headquarters by yellow police tape and law enforcement. With this leading to employees and members of Congress protesting outside, and then lawmakers trying to enter the building, and several of them first speaking to the crowd.
I want to apologize. I want to say I'm sorry that you have to put up with this offensive bull coming out of this White House.
We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like.
We are here to enter the building, and so we can hear firsthand from whoever is here at AID, or at least witness firsthand what is happening with this Elon Musk attempted takeover, which will not stand. We will prevail. Let's go.
Meanwhile, you've got Marco Rubio, right, the head of the State Department, announcing that he himself is now the acting director of USAID, with Rubio accusing the agency's employees of deciding that they're somehow a global charity separate from the national interest of taxpayer dollars. With him adding that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct a sort of mature and serious review. But this is on the flip side. You had Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii saying he would do his best to stop Trump's State Department nominees until the administration's attack on USAID ends. And also, outside of the government, you have people like a professor of public policy at the University of Michigan telling Wired, what we're seeing is unprecedented in that you have these actors who are not really public officials gaining access to the most sensitive data in government. Adding, we have very little eyes on what's going on, saying Congress has no ability to really intervene and monitor what's happening because these aren't really accountable public officials. So this feels like a hostile takeover of the machinery of government by the richest man in the world. And again, of course, this is just the beginning. I mean, going back to that conversation with Musk this morning, he also said,
I think we need to go in and do wholesale removal of regulations. Like regulations basically should be default gone. Default gone, not default there, default gone. And if it turns out that we've missed the mark on a regulation, we always add it back in. This is our shot. This is the best hand of cards we're ever going to have. And if we don't take advantage of this best hand of cards, it's never going to happen. So we're going to do it.
I agree.
Now or never.
Yeah, now or never.
again, are there too many regulations? That's definitely a conversation that we should have. But what Musk is talking about there, it's pretty extreme. And arguably, the people that it would benefit the most are people like him. And so, with that, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts with everything in this mess that we just talked about? But then, shifting gears, we need to talk about a few different plane-related stories from over the weekend. Starting with the tragic news that a small medical plane crashed near a shopping center in Philadelphia on Friday evening, killing all 6 people on board and a 7th on the ground. Authorities have also confirmed that 19 others were injured by the crash, though they have warned that that number could still change. And this, as officials are still assessing the damage on the ground, with videos circulating on social media showing fires burning all around the impact site, a massive crater where the jet landed, as well as charred cars and debris from the crash spanning multiple blocks. It's also been reported that nearly a dozen properties were damaged, but officials are going door to door to determine if there was any more hidden structural damage. So as far as what we know about the crash, it's really not all that much right now. But we do know that the plane was a jet rescue air ambulance, which conducts around 600 to 700 flights a year and specializes in critical care patients, with a spokesperson saying that in 27 years of operation, the company has only had one other fatal incident in 2023 when 5 crew members died. We also know that the medical plane left the Northeast Philadelphia airport at around 6 p.m. and was planning to stop in Missouri to refuel before reaching its final destination at Tijuana International Airport in Mexico. But with that, you have officials saying that the jet was only in the air for about a minute before it crashed, and this is the cause currently remains unknown, and both the FAA and National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, are investigating. Now, as for the victims here, it's been confirmed that all 6 on board the plane were Mexican citizens. This, including an 11-year-old girl who reportedly just finished receiving life-saving treatment at Shriners Children's Hospital and who was returning home to Mexico alongside her mother. You have a spokesperson for the hospital also confirming that the other people on board were 2 pilots, a doctor, and a paramedic. And as for the 7th person who was killed on the ground, they still have not been publicly identified yet. And that's pretty much all we know about the crash right now. Though, like I said, that was not the only plane safety story from the weekend. Yesterday, we had a United Airlines flight going from Houston to New York.
Many years ago, in the German countryside, a family had been haunted by an unknown presence. For weeks, members of the family complained about strange noises coming from the attic and footsteps leading from the edge of the woods to the corner of their property. And then one day, the family vanished. After a week of them missing from school and church, members of the community went to investigate. It was there that they found the family massacred in their own home. Quite hauntingly, it seems that whoever the killer was lived among the bodies for several days to follow. And to this day remains one of the most terrifying unsolved cases in criminal history. Hello everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the unsolved Hinterkaifeck massacre. Now if you're familiar with true crime or unsolved murder cases, then this probably isn't anything new. The Hinterkaifeck massacre is one of the most famous unsolved murders that I've ever heard of. However, what I want to throw my hat in the ring on isn't only some new information I came across that I haven't heard mentioned on YouTube that often, but to also pose my theory for what I think might have happened. And I'll go ahead and get spoilers out of the way. It's not like I have any new information that I think is 100% going to open and shut the case, but I think some suspects are more likely than others. With credit where it's due, the book The Hinterkaifeck Murders, Terror in the German Countryside by D.A. Chadwick is a fantastic resource for a lot of the investigation that took place right after, as well as the interrogations that took place, and it does a great job at laying out the theories and suspect list of the case. Also, hinterkaifeck.net is a great place to see diagrams and images from the murders, which a big viewer discretion advised if you decide to go looking for that. I will be showing blurred images of the crime scene here, but nothing brutal, because out of respect for the departed, I feel like I probably shouldn't do that. But with that being said, I will be describing a lot of the tragic things that happened to this family, including the young children, so viewer discretion advised. So, if you're interested, stick around after the end as we talk about the terrible, unsolved mystery of the Hinterkaifeck massacre. It's the new year, and with the new year comes a lot of ideas about how we can improve ourselves. Over the past several months, I've been taking my health more seriously, and that's something I plan to continue to do into 2025. And a part of that health plan is today's sponsor, AG1. AG1 is your daily morning health drink that contains things like a multivitamin, a phytonutrient blend, and probiotics all in one scoop. Based on the links of YouTube videos you people watch, I would imagine that fast food or delivery is part of your daily diet. And I'm not one to throw stones, it's part of mine too. And while that can be fun, it's not exactly good for you. And that's where AG1 is here to help. With 8 to 12 ounces of water and just a spoonful of AG1, you can start getting in on all the things your body is missing out on. One of the biggest things I noticed about AG1 is the energy I have throughout the day. Whereas I used to get tired after lunch or rely on caffeine to get me through my day, I'm now wide awake for as many hours as I'm awake. Because it's amazing how much better your body does when it gets the things that it needs. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I drank AG1 and then I lost a bunch of weight and started being more productive, but I am saying that AG1 certainly helped give me the natural energy to get things like that done. AG1 tastes great and is a part of my morning routine that I don't dread, like taking a bunch of different pills and vitamins every day. From your energy to your gut health to your immune support, AG1 is an easy way to make 2025 a little bit better than 2024. And if you're interested on starting your year on the right foot, then there's never been a better time to get in on this offer. That's because right now, if you hit the link in the description at drinkag1.com/Wendigoon or scan the QR code, you'll be able to get $20 off your first subscription to AG1. That is right, $20 off. On top of that, you get things like a free welcome kit with a shaker bottle of vitamin D3 and K2, and some travel packs of AG1. So once again, scan the QR code or hit the drinkag1.com/Wendigoon to get in on this incredible offer today. Thank you all for watching the ad. Thank you to AG1 for sponsoring the channel. As always, it means the most. Hope you all check them out. Link is in the description, and we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. The Hinterkaifeck property was called that because it was behind the small community of Kaifeck in Germany. The small farm here was made up of members of the Gruber family. And to make this story make sense, let's go ahead and break down the actual family members, as there are some repeating names and it can get confusing. And to do that, we're going to do it in the only way I know how. The owner of the Hinterkaifeck farm was a woman named Cecilia, whose family came to own the farm in the 1860s. However, shortly thereafter, her husband died. After this, she was approached by a former servant named Andreas Gruber, who married her, and the two of them had a daughter named Victoria. Also, I see the spellings for these names go back and forth. Sometimes it's Victoria with a K, sometimes it's Victoria with a C, sometimes it's Cecilia, other times it's Cecilia with a Z. I think it just depends on what language is translating the story, but you'll see it go back and forth. Victoria was born in the 1880s and grew up on the property with her family. At At some point, ownership of the farm was transferred over to her. Not long before World War I, Victoria met a man named Carl Gabriel. The two of them became married and had a daughter named Cecilia that Victoria named after her mother. However, in the first year of fighting, Carl would die in World War I, leaving Victoria a widow. It was not long after this, in 1920, that Victoria would give birth to another child, a son named Joseph. Now, Victoria was not married, and the question of who the father of Joseph was is going to become a very important element of this story, especially when we theorize about who the suspect might be. Two people who also lived at the Hunter-Kaifek farm but weren't related to the family were the two maids, Crescens Reiger and Maria Baumgartner. Crescens lived with the family for about a year before the massacre happened, but was not on the property during the night of the murder. Because of this, during the investigation, Crescens was interviewed a lot. On the contrary, Maria Baumgartner was there on the night of the murder, and as a matter of fact, tragically, it was her first day on the job. I should also mention that when our story takes place at the end of March 1922, Cecilia was 7 years old and Joseph was 2. Leading up to the family's untimely demise, a lot of weird stuff was happening around the farm in the early months of 1922. According to the things that the Gruber family would say to neighbors, it seemed that someone had been stalking them. The family reported seeing people standing on the edge of the tree line, just watching them before fading off into the woods. Now, it is true that on either side of the farm there were footpaths that people would frequent to and from different towns, but even because that gives excuse as to why someone would be over there, it doesn't give excuse to why they would just stand there and look at you for a while before moving away as soon as you see them. On top of that, Andreas Gruber said that he had lost a key to the front door of the house, which he couldn't find. This key will come in later. According to a neighbor named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who will become a major player in the story moving forward, on March the 30th, Andreas came to him and said that he found a set of footprints that tracked from the snow at the woods on the edge of the property to the motor shed that connected to the Gruber farm. Not only that, but he found the door to the motor shed thrown open. The Gruber family, like a lot of other families in the farm in the 1920s, had a motor that was connected to the barn in order to mechanize a lot of things within the barn. However, this actual room that housed the motor did not have a connection to the barn itself other than the small holes that the motor itself was ran through. In other words, whoever was able to throw open the door to the motor shed was not able to get access to the rest of the barn. So Gruber and Lorenz supposed that whoever did try to break into the barn wasn't able to, as there was no access from the motor shed. However, the more troubling detail is that Andreas said the set of footprints led to the barn, but he couldn't find any going away from the barn. Andreas conducted a sweep of the barn and the house and wasn't able to find anyone. The detail remained odd. Furthermore, on the evening of March the 30th, Victoria and her father Andreas went out to town to buy supplies. While at a store, Victoria remarked that in the nights prior, the family had heard something moving around in the attic. Andreas investigated with a lantern and a shotgun, but didn't find anything. Regardless, this detail seems to have had Victoria spooked, as she is now relaying it to someone she met out of town. It was also during this trip to town that Andreas told local stories of things like the missing key, as well as a story that he found a newspaper from Munich in the woods near his house. But after he asked the mailman if anyone nearby subscribed to it, the mailman said they didn't, and he didn't deliver that paper. So it's very plain that Andreas was suspicious, but for reasons we'll talk about later, he never took this to the police. Now, it was not new information that the Hunter-Kaifek property was weird. As a matter of fact, their maid, Crescens Reiger, knew this all too well. During Crescens' entire time working with the family, she was freaked out. Crescens lived at the property for only a year and was subjected to all kinds of mental torment. She said she would often hear something stamping around in the attic, or would wake up in the middle of the night to see something jiggling her doorknob. Just a few months prior to March, Crescens had given birth to a young child and decided that she no longer wanted to stay at a farm she believed to be haunted or something similar, so Crescens and her young daughter left in early 1922. So the family began looking for a new maid, and eventually a woman named Maria Baumgartner was hired. One day after Victoria and Andreas' trip to town, on March the 31st, Maria was dropped off by her sister at the Hunter-Kaifek farm. Maria's sister said hello to the family and goodbye to Maria, and left late that evening, and was the last one to see any member of the family alive. That night, something would happen that would become the subject of mystery for over a century to come. The first sign that something might be wrong came the next day, on April the 1st, when Victoria's daughter Cecilia was not present at school. However, Cecilia was described as a child that got sick a lot, and when she was sick, she would stay home from school, so no one thought anything of it. That same day, two men who delivered coffee to farms around town stopped by the household. It was normal for the Gruber family to receive their deliveries on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and given that it was a Friday, the coffee salesman arrived at the Gruber household in order to take their order and drop off their coffee. However, according to the two men, they made their way to the property, knocked on the door, didn't get an answer, peered in the windows and didn't see anything, and then left. Later that night, a witness who was walking to Grover, a small town only 500 meters away from the Hunter Kaifek farm, said that he saw smoke coming from the chimney outside. The witness said that he smelled what he would describe as dirty rags, and as he was peering towards the farm, a man holding a lantern walked up to him. The light being so bright in the middle of the darkness that it blinded the witness, who put his head down and continued on his path. Over the following weekend, no one at church saw the family either, which was especially suspicious considering that Victoria was known to be faithful to her local church. However, it would be on April the 4th that the horrors of what had happened at the property would be revealed. Once again, little Cecilia did not arrive at school, but a more suspicious finding was what happened with Albert Hoffner. Albert Hoffner was a repairman from a town nearby who had come to the Hunter Kaifek farm to repair the aforementioned engine that was inside the engine room. Albert gets to the property around 9 a.m. and after knocking on the doors and hanging around the windows, doesn't see anyone. Other than the dog that is tied up near the front door, it seems that the property is completely dead. But given that the dog is tied up near the front door, Albert thinks that maybe the family is out for the day and tied the dog up as a form of security until they got back. So Albert gives it an hour, hangs out near the property, waiting for someone to show up, and with Maggie Mitchell at the dome, Albert decides to get to work by prying the lock off of the engine shed door. He fixes the engine for the next several hours and leaves the property around 2:30. Since he wasn't able to inform any member of the family that he had fixed the shed, he goes to the neighboring property and sees two girls who are outside taking care of the garden. These girls are Mary and Victoria Schlittenbauer, the daughters of the aforementioned Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Albert tells Mary and Victoria that he just got done fixing the motor if one of them can inform the family whenever the family gets back. So Mary and Victoria go to their father Lorenz and tell him what Albert told them. Lorenz sends two of his sons over to the property next door to let the family know, but after a little bit, the sons come back and say they couldn't find anyone either. It seems at this point that Lorenz got suspicious because, again, the family wasn't seen in church, and it's uncharacteristic for these people who work on their own farm to be gone for 4 days on end. Not to mention that when Lorenz's sons got back, they said that all of the animals were very rowdy and upset. So Lorenz gets two other neighbors, Jacob Sigel and Michael Pohl, to come with him to search the farm. The three men make it to the property and walk to the open feeding area that can be accessed from the front courtyard. From there, the three men decide to make it into the barn that connects to the house that is being barred by a wooden block on the other side. The three men use force to break through the door and begin to search inside the barn itself. While walking around the barn, one of the men feels something at their foot. When they look down, see a human hand. The men quickly sweep away the hay to reveal the body of Victoria Gabriel. At that moment, they see another body behind Victoria and begin to pull it out to realize that it is the body of Andreas. It becomes apparent quickly to the men that the body of four family members is located through the barn, meaning Andreas, Victoria, both Cecilia the grandmother and Cecilia the granddaughter, all lying dead under the hay. Immediately, Jacob and Michael make their way back to the courtyard as Lorenz sprints into the house. Lorenz would later say that he did this in order to check on the 2-year-old Joseph. However, when Lorenz made it into the house, he saw that Joseph had also been murdered inside of his stroller. Lorenz unlocked the front door to the house and the two other men stepped inside. They investigated through the rest of the house to see if anyone was still there, and found the body of Maria Baumgartner dead on the floor of her room. But given that Maria had just got there on March 31st, the night that the murders happened, none of the men knew who she was. The men came outside where Lorenz's two aforementioned sons were waiting. Lorenz told the two boys to run to the nearby town and tell the mayor and police while they stayed at the crime scene. Along the way, these young boys, as you can imagine, told everyone that they passed what had happened at the farm. So word spread around fast, and very quickly, the Hunter Kaifek farm became a circus. By the time the police got there, which was only a few hours later, there were all kinds of people walking through the different rooms of the house, inspecting the dead bodies, giving their opinion, and of course, destroying evidence. Not on purpose, of course. People just, stomping around a crime scene doesn't really help a crime scene. After the police get there, they order everyone to leave that, I'm going to show you with the same stupid little whiteboard that I did earlier. So this is a basic layout of the house to give you an idea of what it looked like during the murder investigation. Outside of the house was a large courtyard, and the house itself was split into 3 different structures. Over here you had the main house or living quarters where things like the bedrooms and kitchen were. This entire section was the barn, with a lot of the animal stalls being in this area and a lot of the hay and area for feeding or taking care of the animals being over here. And then this area is described in a lot of the reports as a machinery or work area, which to me sounds like the 1920s equivalent of a garage, where you work on tractors or whatever. So I'm calling it the garage. Also connected to the side of the barn, but with no way to get into the barn itself, was the motor room that I mentioned earlier, where the repairman came and did his work, and where the footprints leading to it, as well as the broken door, were found by Andreas earlier. When Lorenz, Michael, and Jacob arrived, the 3 of them saw that the doorway that led to the garage area of the building was wide open. After the men stepped in here, they elected to push open this door that was held shut and make their way into the barn itself. It was while in here that they would find the bodies of Victoria, Andreas, grandmother Cecilia, and granddaughter Cecilia dead hidden under the hay. From here, as mentioned earlier, Lorenz made his way through the main section of the house, again according to him, in order to check on young Joseph. As he did this, the 2 others made their way back out to the courtyard to get to the front door. It was here that Lorenz found the body of 2-year-old Joseph, murdered in his stroller or bassinet in Victoria's room. And then, after the other 2 came in, they discovered the body of Bob Gardner in her new quarters, the maid's quarters at the back of the house. From here, the 3 then came outside, Lorenz and his sons, to go tell the local police, and from here, everyone started to come to the house to see the murder scene. A couple other things to mention. This is Victoria's room, as I said, and this is Andreas and grandmother Cecilia's room over here. And then this room seems to be the dining room where a lot of interviews took place. Another thing to mention, because this is going to come up a lot in the investigation, there was an attic that ran through some parts of the house and at least led to a sort of hayloft over the entirety of the garage and barn area. It seems that the way to get up there was at this staircase right as you are leaving the house segment of the property and working your way into the barn part of the property. So it seemed that the only way to access the attic was through this staircase in the main house. That, and there is a ladder mentioned somewhere in the police reports, either being on the outside of the building or in the garage area. But either way, it seems that the most common way to get to the second floor or hidden area of the house is through the staircase. That will matter as we get into the details of the investigation. Also, crucially, whenever Lorenz ran through the house and then opened this front door, he had to unlock it in order to open it. That, in combination with this door being barred shut and there being no other means of access out of the house unless you broke a window, that means whoever was in the house effectively locked themselves in unless they make their way down from the attic, which we'll talk about that more, and how there was potentially a rope used for descent either here or over here. Again, the police notes on this weren't great, given that it was 1922 and none of the departments were really talking to each other. Now, one of the reasons that the Heinrich Kaifek murder sticks out so much in my mind, and one of the reasons that I find it so terrifying, is because, according to investigators, of the way that these murders played out. There were spots of blood underneath the hay and, of course, where the bodies had been left in the barn. But according to investigators, there were no other spots of blood in the rest of the house, save for the area where Maria was killed and young Joseph was killed. And all people who were murdered, except for the grandmother Cecilia, were wearing their nightgowns and sleeping clothes, or basically their pajamas. Maybe grandmother Cecilia did it because she was staying up late to get work done around the house, but it seemed that everyone else was ready to go to bed when the murders took place. What that means likely happened, and again, given that there was no blood through the rest of the house or down this hallway, is that whoever murdered these people waited in the barn and one by one had them step into the barn where they were murdered, dragged out of the doorway, and the killer awaited his next victim. I often find myself thinking, what, if anything, the killer had to do to leave the family members out one by one. Maybe one of them simply walked into the barn in order to do their nightly chores with the animals before they were killed, and then the following family members came to look. Maybe young Cecilia came to look for her mother. And how terrifying that is to imagine that while alone in your house, ready to go to bed, there's someone waiting in another part of it, ready to kill you. This theory of waiting to kill the family members also makes sense given the other two murders, because it's not like Joseph could make his way to the ballroom to see what the rest of his family was doing at only 2 years old. And if the killer had been watching the family for a while, well, they didn't have a maid for 2 months, and Maria had gotten there early that day, which probably meant the killer thought that he or they had killed everyone in the house after they killed these 4, only to make their way into the house and see that there is a new maid that they decided to murder as well. And as mentioned, after these killings were complete, it seems that the killer stuck around with the bodies for a day or so. How monstrous to turn a house full of life into one full of just your own. The story went on to become infamous, especially in Germany, and worked its way into a lot of urban legends. Several stories of werewolves or witches that murdered these people came to mind. And yeah, after seeing the brutality of this, who could blame them? So following this, police began their investigation. And investigation standards in 1922 were not what they are today. For one, the police made their headquarters at the Heinrich farm, and they interviewed everyone or interrogated everyone at the dining room table. On April the 6th, a couple of days after the bodies were found, the coroner came and performed his autopsy in the barn on a makeshift table next to where they were murdered, or at least where the bodies were found. And after the autopsies were performed, all 6 heads were removed and sent to a clairvoyant to see if they could psychically tell anything from the heads. After that, the heads were kept in a nearby city as a part of evidence if a trial was to ever come of the murders. But it seems that the heads, along with a lot of the other documented evidence of what happened, were destroyed in 1944 during Allied bombings of Germany. That's another thing, because Germany went through a war just a couple of decades after this happened, a lot of the records have been lost to time. Without going into too much detail, or at least more than what's required in view of discretion, this was the finding of the autopsy reports. Andreas had been severely hit across the face with such ferocity that part of his cheekbone was exposed. And it seems that the reason he died is because his carotid artery was injured and he bled out. Regardless of this, it seems that Andreas was only hit a single time, which cannot be said for most of the other victims. To start, it seems that Andreas' wife Cecilia had been strangled before the same heavy object that was used to hit Andreas was used to strike her across the face several times. Similarly, Victoria was also struck with a high level of ferocity, along with the series of blows across her face, which left her horribly disfigured. It seems that there were several puncture wounds into her skull. And then the youngest daughter, Cecilia, who again was only 7 years old at the time, was not only struck by the same heavy object several times, but was also cut across her throat. And the autopsy determined that she was seemingly alive for several hours following as she bled out, and again, according to the autopsy, pulled out clumps of her own hair. And as haunting and terrible as it is to mention, it seemed that Cecilia was in a state of undress consistent with someone attempting to assault her in her final moments. The new maid, Miss Baumgartner, was found laying on the floor in her bedroom and had been struck across the face back and forth several times, again by the same heavy-handed weapon. And then the 2-year-old Joseph was found in his stroller, as it seemed the perpetrator raised the heavy weapon and they brought it down through the top of the stroller, killing Joseph in a single blow to the head. Initially, it was believed that the weapon that was most likely used was a pickaxe, because the weight and type of injury seemed consistent with that sort of weapon. It would later be determined that in actuality a mattock was used, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, during the initial investigation, the police found several patches of hay up in the hayloft that seemed to be patted down. In other words, it seems that someone was sleeping on the hay since the hay had been moved. In other words, between the time someone found the animals and now, someone slept on the hay. Furthermore, it seemed that someone had defecated in the hayloft and had moved tiles around in the floor of the hayloft in order to see the ground beneath them. This, in combination with pieces of food found around the premises, as well as the report mentioned earlier that someone was running a stove on the night of April 1st, implies that after murdering the family, someone stayed there with them. Now, there are a few reasons this could be. For one, on the night of March the 31st, a huge blizzard hit, leading investigators to believe that perhaps whoever snuck into the house to kill the family was trapped by the snow and had to wait for it to melt. It's also worth mentioning that there seem to be a lot of holes in the police's investigation. Like, even aside from mentioning all of the some other details that seem to be just wrong. For example, yes, it does seem that whoever killed the family stayed in the house because of things like the defecation in the hayloft and the hay being laid down, and there was some food found in the hayloft. But one of the police's main points for this is that a lot of food was missing from the food storage of the Gruber family, when in reality it seems that a lot of that was Lorenz's fault. See, while people were staying there and while police were staying there initially and a bunch of people were coming to look, I guess in order to be kind, Lorenz just kind of started handing food out to people. And even though the police seemed to be aware of this and even accepted some of the food, which didn't take during the crime scene, but whatever, even though the police knew this, they logged the missing food as evidence that a lot of people probably killed the family and were here for a really long time. Furthermore, on April the 6th, again 2 days after the bodies were found and the same day the autopsy was performed, the police make the first mention of a rope that leads down from the hayloft to the ground floor. More specifically, the kind of attic area that's hidden away from the open hayloft that would be harder to see if you were walking around on the ground. So, in other words, there was a dangling rope in front of them for 2 days, and then one day they go, oh, there's a rope here. Someone write that down. Either they just didn't think to mention it or didn't notice it for a couple of days, or with all of the people poking around the house, someone crawled up to the attic and pushed the rope out. Either way, it seems that there was a rope that led from the attic to the ground floor, meaning that there might have been another way for someone to get to the hayloft of the barn, to the ground floor, without going on the ladder that was on the outside of the building, or in other words, exposed to prying eyes. A lot of their investigation was kind of like subjective too. Like, for example, at one point they were trying to determine if someone could hear a scream from the barn from inside of the living room. So one of them just went to the barn and yelled, and then all the guys inside said, nope, we didn't hear that. So they just wrote down that it was unlikely had someone from the barn screamed or called out to get other people to come in there. And it's like, okay, but like, how loud did the guy scream? You're like, were you listening that hard? Were you talking to someone else when he screamed? Like, it's not how we do experiments, but whatever. From the several interrogations and interviews that the police performed in the dining room of the Hydrokaifek farm, the story of the farm itself came to light, as tragic as it was. The most apparent thing that came out of these interviews is that the Gruber family was not a good one. The majority of people around town just had stories about the family being generally unpolite or kind of kept to themselves and didn't talk to a lot of neighbors. But those who knew the family had much darker stories about them. For one, Victoria was the only daughter of Andreas and Cecilia. But according to those, she was just the only one that survived. Several accounts, including that of Carl Gabriel, again, he is the guy that was married to Victoria for a time, had stated that the Grubers had more children, at least one known of, a girl named Sophie, but that when the children misbehaved, they would go long periods of time without eating and were often locked in a cellar for days on end. And that many of the children died of malnutrition and disease. Victoria was just the one who lived. To clarify, Carl Gabriel had told people of this before he went to World War I. He did not give a testimony to the police 4 years after his death from beyond the grave. And if it wasn't bad enough that Victoria was the family's only surviving daughter, Andreas would frequently have sexual relations with her. In 1915, Andreas served a short stint in jail for incest. This is also the reason that despite Andreas' suspicions, he never brought anything to the police, because he already had bad interactions with the police after being arrested for incest. And a few years later would have another charge put against him for incest by Lorenz Schlegelbauer. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Lorenz told police that Victoria told him since she was 16 years old, her father began having relations with her, and had tried even earlier. So much so that it was widely believed throughout the town, and officially known for a while, that the 2-year-old Joseph was actually the child of Victoria and her father Andreas. This was just a known fact throughout the town, and as you could imagine, a lot of people hated the Gruber family because of it. Or at the very least, they hated Andreas. Even if a lot of people just knew this to be a rumor, what they did know about the family is that they were said to have a lot of money. And this makes sense as they seemingly had a large farm, and Cecilia's family came from money, but the Grubers, at least outwardly, were very stingy. They would pay workers what they were owed, but not a drop more. And if they did provide food for people, it was always the bare minimum. This is actually something stated by Carl Gabriel. After Carl married Victoria, it it seems that he was immediately in over his head. He told his family stories of things like the Grubers having several children that died in the cellar. And he found out that his new wife had previously been forced into relations by her father, and that the family overall was generally unfriendly, had bad food, and were horrible to be around. As a matter of fact, just before the war, Paul had already been talking about divorce. So it was always said throughout the town that there was a ton of money hidden at the Hydrokypho farm. And this led police to what they believed to be the motivation for the killing: money. And on the surface, that makes a lot of sense, right? You have this stingy family in town that no one cares about, and they're said to have a lot of money on the property. So anyone would have to do is break into the house, steal the money, and then home free. And perhaps they ran into members of the family when this happened and could leave no witnesses. However, there's still a few holes with this idea. For one, and again, this is an unsolved murder, but spoilers, I guess. A year after this, there were no charges, and no one was convicted of it, so the farm passed off to family members who would demolish the property. In the demolishing, they found in the attic of the house a matted candle that was covered in human hair and blood and determined to be the murder weapon. It was a matted candle that Andreas had and had kept in his barn. He had kind of modified it to be like a club that would be used in trench fighting during World War I. So does that mean that people broke into the house to steal money but didn't bring a weapon? But when they found a weapon in the barn, were then determined to kill everyone in the house? Also, the ferocity of the murders doesn't exactly seem like someone who's just covering up evidence. Sure, maybe on Andreas's part, he was just struck once, but the women were ferociously attacked. And of course, needless to say, if your concern is getting rid of witnesses, then why on earth would you kill a 2-year-old child? But perhaps most importantly to poke a hole in this theory, money wasn't missing. Sure, it's estimated that around 100,000 marks were missing from Victoria's personal stash, but throughout the rest of the house, they found things like gold and expensive jewelry and silver coins. You know, the kind of thing, if you just murdered an entire family, you would probably take the time to pick up. While a bunch of Victoria's belongings were lying on her bed as if someone was going through them for some reason, you would think someone that is there to murder a family and then hang out for a few days would check a jewelry drawer. So police kind of reframed their thinking. Maybe then it was just a serial killer. And sure, this does kind of make sense, especially with the more demented details of the case, like killing a child or sticking around the dead bodies for at least a day afterwards. And there's a lot of people to this day who espouse this as their primary theory. They'll connect it to other serial killers in the region or other, like, spree killings that were happening during this time. The book The Man from the Train asserts that an American serial killer by the name of Paul Mueller, who disappeared around 1912, may have traveled to Europe and committed this massacre. As a lot of the killings he is suspected to be tied to have similarities with the Hydrokypho massacre. But even with the serial killer angle, there are still some problems that arise out of that theory. For example, why stick around? Sure, maybe stick around the night you committed the murders because, as mentioned, there was a blizzard outside. But why stick around to eat food and sleep in the hayloft or burn something in the oven, according to the one witness? For one, despite all of this believing to have happened on the night of March the 31st, which is indicated by a lot of things like Cecilia missing school the next day, and Maria being found dead in her bed that she had just arrived to with her bag still intact, and everyone being found dead in their night clothes. Despite it being clear this happened on March the 31st, the calendar in the kitchen was flipped to April the 1st. On top of that, after the mailman delivered mail to the address on April the 1st, by April the 4th, someone had moved it to the inside window of the living room, which was the place that Andreas would always stash the newspaper. Furthermore, and this is kind of murky because documentation of this wasn't perfect, but it seems that between April the 1st and April the 4th, someone had moved the dog from a post tied out, like further away from the house, to right at the front door. Which again is what the family would do whenever they were out from the house for the day. So it seems that whoever was around the house after the murders took place was familiar with the Gruber's habits. Another detail that isn't confirmed but is rumored is that in the corner of the barn there was about a shovel-deep trench that was attempted to be dug out, as if someone was starting to dig a hole in the barn before deciding to instead put the bodies underneath the hay. So why would a random serial killer change the calendar date, put the newspaper on the inside of the window, move the dog around, and then attempt to bury the bodies in a property they have no connection to. Because sure, you want as much time between the police finding the bodies and you having a chance to get as far away as possible, I get that. But if you're so concerned about delaying the time until the bodies are found, why stick around? Sure, the whole someone stayed with the body for 4 days is thrown again because of the police logging all the missing food that they ate, and considering that to be a group of people who stuck around the bodies for too long. But it seems that whoever was there was around for at least a day or two. Another thing that happened with the Hunter Kaifek case is it became the story to be talked about. People, during the investigation, were literally taking trains from towns outside of the area to come visit the murder site and just gawk and point at the place where the body used to be, I guess. Because of that, it seems that the police had a lot of leads, but they weren't all good leads. For one, every homeless person in the region immediately became a suspect, because since the police said a vagrant might be responsible, a lot of people just started making up stories about, oh, I was out in town, and then someone ran by and said they killed the whole family, and then they ran off into the woods or something. There was a woman in the 1940s who went to a priest and wrote on a piece of paper that her brothers are responsible for the killings, and then on her deathbed again said that they were responsible for the killings. Those brothers were Anton and Adolf Gump. Adolf Gump is an insane name. But the police interviewed the brothers, and it seems one was dead and the other one had zero connection and had never been in the region. There were a few cases like that of people randomly saying someone they know was the murderers because they told them one time under a certain circumstance, but every single suspect that they looked into had an alibi or wasn't in the area at the time. There are even some people who were temporarily jailed over such suspicions, but no one was ever charged for the murders. As mentioned, a year later, possession of the property would pass on to family members of the groomers who decided to destroy the farm because who would want to live there? And it was during the destruction of the property that the mattock I mentioned earlier was found, as well as a small pocket knife, both of which seemed to be hidden in the attic of the house itself. The pocket knife seemingly being what was used on young Cecilia. So whoever killed them, after having killed everyone, threw the murder weapons up into the attic of the house. Which again, if it was just a random passerby, why would they leave the evidence with their fingerprints on it? Which fingerprints were a thing at the time. Why would, you wouldn't think so in this case with everyone touching everything, but still. Why would someone who was just passing through to murder a family leave the murder weapon on the murder site? As mentioned, nothing conclusive would ever come from the case, but there are certainly some theories. For one, it seemed that Victoria knew something was up. 2 weeks prior to the murder, she had placed 700 gold marks in the church confessional. The priest found 700 gold marks in the confessional and knew that Victoria was the only member of the church who was well off enough to do that, and after asking her, she admitted that it was her. Not only that, but in the weeks leading up to the case, she had closed several savings accounts and bank accounts after withdrawing the cash. This is why it's believed that 100,000 marks were stolen from Victoria's personal inventory at the house, because despite taking all of this money out, it seems that she never spent it anywhere and no one could ever find it. I guess it is possible that someone who knew she had withdrawn all of this money came to the house to kill everyone and take it, but why would you take, the one stack of cash you know about and not grab all the other stacks of gold throughout the house? Again, the family seemed to be rather well off and the farm was in Victoria's name. On top of that, one of 7-year-old Cecilia's classmates would be interviewed years later. This classmate said that on March the 30th, again the day before the murders, Cecilia came to school very tired. Cecilia told her friend that the night before, her grandfather, Andreas, slapped Victoria, Cecilia's mom, and that Victoria ran away from the house crying into the woods, and that the family was out all night looking for her, only finding her in the early hours of the morning. So, a couple days before the murder, Victoria was in such dire straits with her father that she ran away from the house in the middle of the cold winter night. Or maybe March 30th isn't technically winter. It was cold outside. It's for these reasons that most of the theories around what happened at the Hunter Kaifek massacre revolve around Victoria. And I, for one, think that it makes the most sense. For one, she was the only member of the family who ever really got out of the house and interacted with people. And also, she seemed to be the only one that was doing anything suspicious before the murders happened. With that being said, there are 3 primary suspects that get talked about in relation to this case. Again, if you put aside the ones that are saying this is a sort of serial killing or a robbery gone wrong that just by coincidence happened to this family.
But given some of the circumstantial evidence that I talked about earlier, I think that it is more likely that whoever murdered this family knew them, and that this killing was very personal. The first suspect that got talked about a lot when all of this happened is also the fun one. That suspect is Carl Gabriel. That is right, Victoria's husband, who supposedly died in the trenches during World War I. It was not uncommon at the time for soldiers to be reported dead and then just show up back home. I mean, think about it. You have these massive, charges across trench lines or chemical weapon attacks, and seemingly entire battalions get wiped out at once. Well, the soldiers there would be presumed dead, but if they were actually alive, they have no way to communicate that to their family until they just catch a train and ride home. So the theory floated around town for a time. Again, it was a known fact that Andreas was having relations with his daughter, and that supposedly that's where the 2-year-old child came from. The theory that was floating around is that Carl returned from the war having been presumed dead, and was furious to find that Victoria had had a child. So in a bit of rage, Carl picked up the mattock and killed his former wife, as well as the rest of her family, and his own daughter, as well as the illegitimate child of his former wife and her father. Now, even if we play with the whole theory that Carl survived the war, this seems kind of implausible. For one, as mentioned, Carl was already talking about divorcing Victoria before he shipped out to the war. So then why, after several years, would he decide he was so angry about her current situation that he has to kill her? As well as, and I can't stress this enough, his own 7-year-old daughter. Also, there have never been any records of him surviving or him showing up in town afterwards. So did he just walk from the front line to his house to kill his family and then just walk somewhere else? One of the main reasons that this theory gets talked about so much is during World War II, the theory made a resurgence. A German soldier had claimed that he was held captive by Russian soldiers where he met Carl Gabriel, who was now a Russian commander. The German soldier told this whole story that while he was a prisoner of war, there was a Russian commander who spoke fluent German and sounded like he was from the area. And then after realizing the prisoner was from the area, the commander asked if he knew of the Heinrich Heifetz murders, and the prisoner said yes, and the commander said, "I am the one who committed the Heinrich Heifetz murders." And that he explained himself to be Carl Gabriel, and then let this German soldier, as well as 2 other German soldiers, go so that they could go back to the town and report this story so that an innocent man would not be charged for the murders. Now, there's some problems with this. For one, when the investigation was happening right after the murders, the police looked into the Carl Gabriel idea and got full confirmation from the German military that yes, he died in World War I. On top of that, according to the German prisoners, the reason he became a Russian commander is because he was so vicious and fierce that the Russians liked him and decided to make him a commander. But if there was one thing that the Russians really weren't fans of during World War II, it was, Germans. And why would the guy who massacred his own wife, child, and family and was now supposedly a Russian commander because he was so evil and vicious or whatever, let these 3 go so that they could keep an innocent man from being tried for his crimes? Obviously, it sounds like a tall tale made up by some soldiers who wanted some publicity, right? But nevertheless, the Carl Gabriel theory comes up a lot whenever you read about this case. With that out of the way, there are 2 primary suspects who get talked about in this case more than anyone else. One of them is Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Now, a lot of you guys were probably listening to this whole story and saying to yourself over and over, oh, so Lorenz did it, right? Because he was the first one who showed up on the crime scene, he was the one who was accidentally messing with evidence, he was the one who knew the family, and perhaps most interestingly, he is the one who, officially at least, was the father of Joseph. So, I need to rewind a little bit for this to make sense. While Lorenz had his problems with the Gruber family, he always had a fondness for Victoria. The 2 of them had talked to each other on a few occasions, and according to Lorenz, after just a few times of speaking to each other, Victoria offered to go to bed with him. Lorenz was taken back by this, as he was married at the time, and denied her offer, but a few years later, when Lorenz's wife died of cancer in 1918, him and Victoria seemed to start a relationship. One kind of heartbreaking note is Lorenz, as well as several of the men who were interviewed by police during this whole thing, made remarks that Victoria was easy and especially promiscuous and whatnot, which, given the amount of trauma that poor girl went through, is heartbreaking. I'll talk about more at the end, but I don't think there's anyone except maybe the children, of course, that I feel as bad for in this case as Victoria. So Lorenz and Victoria had a relationship and began seeing each other on and off. At one point, Victoria even brings up the idea of marriage, and Lorenz agrees. However, it is then that Victoria tells him that she's pregnant. Again, all this is around 1919, 1920. Now, Lorenz knew, and it was common knowledge throughout the town, that Andreas had had incestuous relations with Victoria. And according to people like Crescens, the maid who quit earlier, even after Andreas had his stint in jail, it was not uncommon for him to abuse his own daughter. So Lorenz says that it might be my child that you're pregnant with, but it just might as well be your father's. And Lorenz decides that he will not claim the child and reports Andreas to the police again for incest. After Andreas is jailed, Victoria begs Lorenz to take responsibility for the child's paternity, both because it would be a better standing for Victoria in the public eye to have a child with someone that isn't her father, and it would also bode well for the child itself to not be known as the son of his grandfather. So Lorenz claims paternity, then there becomes a whole fight between the family and Lorenz as far as child support goes, with the family saying that Victoria's owed this much and Lorenz saying she's not, and it goes back and forth for a while before Victoria eventually drops it. At one point, Lorenz brings up the idea to the family that he wants to marry Victoria, and initially the family isn't approval of it, before one day, Andreas says no. Apparently, at one point, Lorenz had came to the family and said that he would marry her if Andreas stopped having incestuous relationships with her, and Andreas said something to the effect of, "We'll see." You know, Andreas really needed to get beat to death with a pickaxe, but it's a shame the rest of his family had to die as well. Based on some comments that Andreas made to people and his behavior, it seems that he didn't want anyone to have Victoria but him. Just a few days before the massacre, on March the 26th, one of Lorenz's youngest daughters would die of whooping cough. So, several people believe that just a few days later, perhaps he was fed up with this relationship with the Gruber family, decided to confront them, and a fight broke out that resulted in him massacring the family, including Andreas, who caused this trouble, and Victoria, who he may have saw as responsible for all of this, and killing the child that he saw as an illegitimate son of the woman he wanted to marry and the father who prevented it. And it is safe to say that a lot of Lorenz's behavior was suspicious. As mentioned, during the hours following the crime, there were way too many people there, and they were touching way too much stuff. And Lorenz seemed to be encouraging this by handing out pieces of food and encouraging people to eat. And as the investigation was underway, Lorenz kind of acted like a tour guide, telling them what to think of other people in town, who they should interrogate, etc. And it was public knowledge that Lorenz had a lot of problems with the Gruber, so if all of them disappeared, that would be great for him. Lorenz was also incredibly knowledgeable about the case. He knew every detail by heart, and the whole detail about someone tried to dig a hole in the barn, but were unable to and just covered the bodies in hay, that came from him. After the barn was demolished, he was speaking to an onlooker when he said the ground was too hard to dig, so they must have covered the bodies in hay. Not only that, but according to witnesses, years later in a pub, when the topic of the Hunter Effect murders were being discussed, and someone asked why the footsteps went one way through the snow to the house, but not back out, Lorenz said, "I simply walked backwards through my own footprints through the snow." Now, he immediately clarified when asked about this, that he was saying "I" as if I was the killer voice. But this, as well as several murmurings throughout the town that Lorenz, being an important town official and very well off, very well might have committed the crimes and then threatened other people to be silent lest they get in some kind of legal trouble. As a matter of fact, one of the two men that Lorenz brought to the farm on the day of the murders would later say that they think Lorenz did it and brought them there as an alibi to say that he was the first one who showed up. I mean, remember the detail about whenever they get to the barn, Lorenz goes through the house and then unlocks the door? Well, he unlocked the door with a key. Remember how Andreas had said that a key went missing in the days before the murders? Well, seemingly here that key is now in the door. And whenever Lorenz was asked about it, he said the key was already there. Or perhaps Lorenz stole a key and was now placing it here in order to act natural and gain access to the house, as he did perhaps when the murders took place. Now, a lot of people think Lorenz did it, and a lot of things like what I mentioned point towards him. But personally, I do not. And I have a few reasons for this. For one of the reasons that Lorenz was ruled out by investigators when the case first happened is that Lorenz had horrific asthma. And asthma is really an understatement. Lorenz was in World War I and was exposed to chemical gas like mustard gas. So his lungs were effectively crippled and he lost his wind very quickly. Doesn't seem like the kind of person that would have the capability to murder a family of 6. On top of that, yes, Lorenz knew a lot about the case, but he seemed to be more obsessed with the case than anyone else alive. Lorenz was there for every detail of it. Every time a bit of information was made public, he wanted to know it. According to his family, in the years following the massacre, Lorenz was destroyed by it. Not only did he seem to mourn the death of Victoria, at least in some part, but it destroyed his reputation. People around town would quit serving him. He wasn't allowed to do business with the other business owners. Everyone looked at him like a pariah. So it makes sense that someone whose life was so heavily affected by it would spend so much time thinking of the case. It would make sense that he would come to conclusions like, oh, well, the small patch of shovel-deep soil that was dug up was probably someone who tried to bury the bodies, but realized the ground was too hard. And then he just kind of spouts that information to whoever's willing to listen. Same with his assertion about the footprints leading to the barn. Also, that doesn't even make any sense. What would that even have to do? Are you saying that the killer made a set of footprints to the barn and then walked backwards through the footprints just to freak out the family, and then made an entry at some other time? Like, that doesn't make sense. And also, as cheesy as it is to say, I think in some way that Lorenz cared about Victoria. Think about it. Not only had he agreed to marry her, but at this point he had taken responsibility for the child that very well might have not been his. He was willing to admit publicly to a court that he was the father of young Joseph, and he suffered the consequences for it. Lorenz said that his own son hated him for it. He hated that Lorenz, after the death of the son's mother, would sleep with another woman and have a child outside of his family. Not to mention the reproach that probably came from a small town when a well-to-do person takes acknowledgement of an illegitimate child. If the murders would have happened right after he said the child wasn't his, and Andreas was being convicted again for incest, then maybe the idea of Lorenz murdering the family would have a point. But Lorenz went through all of that and then still tried to marry Victoria and claimed the baby. Also, if Lorenz was to murder them, why was he so especially brutal to Cecilia the grandmother, Victoria, and Cecilia the 7-year-old child? I mean, why would he try to undress her and then just give Andreas a single hit to the face? I think what is much more likely is that the third suspect we're going to talk about today is the one that I personally believe probably murdered the family. And that man is, of course, Andreas Kruger. So, Andreas, as we've established, very evil person, with the ability to kill children if the beliefs of his children died in the cellar are true. As we know, Lorenz was wanting to marry Victoria, and it seemed that Andreas wanted nothing to do with that. But in the weeks leading up to the massacre, it seemed that Victoria was withdrawing a lot of money. Maybe Victoria had some plans to run over to Lorenz's property and live with him. Maybe after the death of Lorenz's daughter, he tried to push her to do it quicker. Maybe that's why, according to the young Cecilia, on the night of March the 29th and morning of March the 30th, Andreas had hit Victoria, causing her to run into the woods. Maybe they have had a fight about Victoria and Lorenz being together. I mean, think about it. The murder weapon that was used on the family was the mattock that Andreas had constructed. So perhaps Victoria begins fighting him about it one night, and Andreas hits her and then doesn't quit hitting her. And then maybe because Victoria was out of the barn for too long, Cecilia came to check, and then Cecilia and her daughter came to check, and Andreas murdered them one by one. And sadly, due to the young Cecilia's state of undress, I do know one person in this story who is willing to abuse their own daughter in that way, or their own granddaughter in that case. And then, of course, from there, he's already on a rampage and can't leave any witnesses, so he murders Baumgartner, who had just arrived earlier that night, and then, of course, murders the child that he feels is responsible for all this turmoil in the first place. This would explain a lot of things. This would explain why the newspaper was placed up in the window. This would explain why the calendar was flipped over to April the 1st. This would explain why the mattock and the pocket knife were thrown into the attic. It was the only place within his own home that Andreas could think to hide the weapons. Perhaps then, for the next couple days, not knowing what to do because he didn't have a plan to begin with, Andreas hides in the roof of the hayloft and the attic and watches people come to visit the house before they leave. This would explain the sleeping on the hay. This would explain defecating in the hayloft and the food that was eaten. It would also explain the casual attempt to dig a mass grave before just hiding the bodies in the hay. Heck, if you think Andreas's murder is premeditated, this even explains him going to a store the day before, saying he's seen weird people around the house, saying he's seen footsteps, saying that a key has gone missing. I mean, if Lorenz was right about the key being in the front door, then perhaps the key was never lost in the first place. Perhaps Andreas, after he had murdered everyone, locked every entry to the house because, again, the doorway into the barn was barred by a wooden block as well. Perhaps he locked every entry in the house and then went up to the attic, where the only way back down from there was through the rope that the police would mention on April the 6th. Perhaps Andreas just panicked and decided he was going to wait in there until something happened. The police even mentioned that despite the amount of trauma to the victims' faces, there was no spot where it looks like blood was pooled or a definitive spot where the murder happened. So maybe Andreas, in a panic, even tried to clean up some of the blood and then burn the rags, which would explain the smell of dirty rags as the witness described. Maybe Andreas, trying to get someone away from the property, was the one who walked out, held the lantern up to the witness's face. I believe all of that, and frankly to me, this is the version of the story that makes the most sense. This explains why someone would go through Victoria's stuff but not take any of the money in the rest of the house. Heck, maybe Andreas found the 100,000 marks that Victoria had stored and decided in rage to burn it along with the rags he used to try to clean up the blood. All of this makes perfect sense to me, and honestly it's the version of the story I think to be most likely. Except for one little problem. Andreas was also murdered. So how could Andreas have murdered the whole family, and then Andreas himself also be murdered, along with the family? It's almost frustrating how well Andreas murdering the family is as a theory, except for the little detail that he died as well. As a matter of fact, there's one popular theory that after murdering the entire family, then hanging out in the house for a couple days, Andreas slipped and fell onto the matting. And just accidentally cut his face open and then died that way. And I guess decided to crawl through the hay to lie next to Victoria's body. But I think there is someone who may have been likely to murder Andreas, even after the rest of the family was killed. And I think it's someone we've already talked about. Lorenz. What if Andreas murdered his entire family and then in a panic begins to hide in the attic of the house or bumble his way through the house itself, not sure of what to do, when Lorenz, who was already in an argument, what if Lorenz, in a rage, gashed Andreas across the face and caused him to bleed out? Lorenz would have immediately recognized how the situation looks because now the murderer is dead and you are holding the murder weapon. So Lorenz simply places the body of Andreas next to Victoria and then throws the matting handle up into the attic. Mostly it's suspicious as soon as Lorenz got to the property on April the 4th with his two witnesses that he quickly pulled out the body of Victoria, seemingly doing this to see if they were alive, but then not doing it to the two Cecilias who were covered up on the other side of the room. Perhaps Lorenz did this so that no evidence that maybe Andreas was laid onto Victoria's body days later could be brought forward. And if Andreas hadn't already done it, maybe Lorenz threw the matting into the attic to hide after he had killed Andreas. To his deathbed, Lorenz would state that he was not responsible for the Mahjong murders, but maybe he was responsible for one of them. And if that's the case, I see no better cosmic justice for this. That the one who tried to take Victoria away from all of this is the one who avenged her death. But of course, all of that is just my theory. While I think it's most likely that Andreas murdered his family, it is just an idea that perhaps Lorenz was the one to kill Andreas. Because if Lorenz did it, then I have no idea who would have. I mean, maybe you could say that somehow Andreas managed to strike his own face hard enough to cause that injury, but that seems unlikely. Or maybe the whole thing that he fell and tripped and cut up his face to death is true, in which case that would be kind of funny. Regardless of all of this, what we do know is that the 6 people at the Hinterkaifeck farm lost their lives, most of which tragically, again, aside from Andreas. And I don't know how culpable his wife Cecilia was in all the abuse that happened. I, of course, feel horrible for young Joseph and young Cecilia, children who suffered brutal deaths and did not deserve and probably couldn't comprehend any of it. And I also feel terrible for Victoria, a girl whose entire life seems miserable and full of dread, and then to be killed in such a brutal way in her final moments. In 2007, a police academy in Germany did an entire reevaluation of the Hinterkaifeck case using new methods, whatever that means, and said that, for one, because of a lack of evidence, there will probably never be a way to prove what happened at the Hinterkaifeck farm. But that investigation, each of the researchers came to the same conclusion on the same suspect. But they would not release that information because they had some surviving descendants. Which is the dumbest cop-out I think I've ever heard. Like, could you, imagine, like, could you, I know they don't know, it's just their guess about it. But to not say what the guess is because you're afraid that their great-grandson or whatever will get harassed for it, who would do that? Like, if there's still great-grandchildren of, like, Lee Harvey Oswald or John Wilkes Booth, or I don't know if that guy had kids. Regardless, there are descendants of famous killers, and it's not like they get attacked. Just because you say you all think that this person did it doesn't mean their grandchildren will get. That's the dumbest reason to not release information ever. I hate it here. Okay. Regardless of all of that, I don't think we'll ever know for sure who murdered the family on March the 31st. And it's tragic and terrible, and there's really no good ending to it because we don't know who did it, and there's not closure for the victims that were lost, but hopefully, in some small way, we can remember at least Victoria and her children as people, and as people who certainly didn't deserve what they go to, and hopefully their souls are somewhere more at rest now than they were in this lifetime, except for Andreas. He absolutely deserved what he had coming. And with that, we have the end of what I think is the, if not the most disturbing, one of the most disturbing unsolved cases I've ever come across. I covered this way back when I did the Unsolved True Crime Iceberg, and ever since I first read about it, it has stuck with me, and it's been in the back of my head, so I decided to read a book about it, to see what else was there, and it's so much worse than I thought, and I feel so bad for Victoria and the family, and her kids, I mean. And yeah, it's a tragedy every way you look at it, but hopefully, you know, I don't know, this is a depressing video. There's no, like, good, you learned this, or this came of it, or whatever. Everyone's sad, and it's awful. Except maybe, you know what? If my interpretation of events is true, then Lorenz seemed to be an alright guy. And if he did murder Andreas, that's really cool of him to do that. But at the same time, I don't want to fully double down there because I'm just a YouTuber and can very well be wrong. And maybe Lorenz was actually the murderer because people smarter than me seem to think he is sometimes, and some other people think it's Andreas. I don't know. It's complicated. I'm going to stop talking. As gruesome as this story was, hopefully you enjoyed it. And I just want to say thank you for watching. I always feel weird covering these stories because, especially when we don't know anything for sure, I have to be careful about giving too much praise to one person or not enough to another. Again, I don't think Lorenz did it. I think Andreas did it. But I have to be careful because I can always be wrong, right? But yeah, this is a very depressing story, but it's something that stuck with me, and if something sticks with me for too long, I have to make a video about it, or it just gets stuck in here, and it's not good for my health. So, this was that, and as depressing and terrible as it was, hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something, even if you had heard of this case before, and I greatly appreciate that. Thank you all for the support. Thank you so much for the views, the likes, the contributions. It means the world. You guys are great. And I believe that should do it for now, but I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!